Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. I am Kathy Delano. I am the current chair for the paper division for ReMA. I'm also the vice president of Paper Stock Industries, and we are very excited about this panel today. I'll let GiGi introduce her the speakers here shortly, but I want to introduce GiGi. GiGi is with Synergy Waste. She is the chair for our membership of the Gulf Coast chapter, and she also serves as treasurer for the State of Texas Alliance for Recycling and the Executive Board of Treasurers. Yay, Texas. And then also I want to give a little plug to PSI, Paper Stock Industries. We are a chapter of ReMA. We have our president over here, who's Tamara Mayberry. Give away. We also have our secretary treasurer, Ed Tucciaroni, in the back there. Try and look anonymous. And just if anybody ever wants to get information on PSI, it's a great organization to be a part of. We have 3 events a year. We also have a scholarship where we get our donors to obviously donate money. And we gave out this year over $55,000 in scholarship funds, over 21 recipients. So we're very proud of that. And we want to thank everybody who donated and was participating. And with that, I will pass it over to Ms. GiGi.
Thank you, Kathy. I'd like to thank everybody for showing up to our panel, our spotlight on paper. So we're going to go through some basic rules and regulations. Don't forget, we are bound by antitrust with our rad mama rules. If I ever looked that good in spandex, I'd want to be on this. So, and then we're going to follow that with a safety moment. Ryan, if you'll join us.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to paper. I was asked by GiGi. GiGi and I have worked together for a long time. One thing I was asked to talk about today was protective equipment and what's appropriate with the paper industry is hearing protection. So I'm going to run through a couple of things just for non-safety, non-expert people in here. If you have to yell at somebody out in your facility to talk to them, you're above the threshold for hearing protection. The different types of hearing protection that are most effective that you can get fairly easily. One are earmuffs. They don't knock down the sound as much as earplugs, but they can be effective. Okay. You can get earplugs that you simply insert in your ears, twist them up, put them in your ear, let them expand. If you have people, and I've worked at tier recyclers, at Omnisource and Metalax. If you have people who need to wear hearing protection, but they also have to have the ability to use a radio, you can get earplugs that are specially made that can be inserted. It blocks outside noise, but it also allows them to hear the radio. Okay, it's tied into that. For those type of applications, I would go through your safety supplier. They can generally find somebody for you. But I have yet to be at any type of recycling facility. And I dealt with metal for my years, but any type of recycler, I have yet to be at one where you didn't need some sort of hearing protection. Start with getting the noise tested. You can get little apps on your phone if you want. It shows you the decibels. If you're above 85 decibels, you need hearing protection. Okay. And the important part about this is you've got little hairs. I won't get into all the biological stuff, but you have little hairs inside your ear, inside your cochlea, and those things get shaken, and that's how you hear. Well, if the noise is too loud, they get shaken too hard and they fall out. So for us guys, it's like the hair on your head, right? Except our hair falls out on our head, we can call hair club for men, right? There's no hair club for men for the hairs in your ears that collect sound. So, but again, you can start out, if you haven't done it yet, you can start out using an app on your phone, just a decibel meter. Contact your safety supplier, and then they can put you in contact with everybody else. But this is especially if you have long-term employees, please make sure that, you're taking care of them. I know it's a pain. My ex-father-in-law hit the TV. You could hear it 2 blocks down the road. He was a trained engineer for many, many years and didn't wear hearing protection. So that's my safety message. You're in good hands with GiGi and the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. So thank everybody for joining us for the paper spotlight. And I think it's really important when we're all here. We're going to be in trade is a big discussion, and recycling rates kind of what we're talking about. So we're cracking the code today with the truth behind paper recycling rates and market shifts. And I think that's going to be very relevant. So as we move on, we're going to start with Mr. Weber. Terry, thank you for being here and being available for us. He serves as the American Forest and Paper Association Vice President of Industry Affairs in leading the industry marketplace advocacy and statistical programs. So he's about the numbers, a lot of numbers. So he joined the AF&PA in 2011, starting the State Government Affairs Group. Prior to joining the organization, Weber served in various policymaking roles at both the federal and state levels. He holds an undergraduate degree from Northwestern University and a law degree from the University of Southern California. But he's currently a member of the state bars of California and Oregon, where he resides in Portland with his wife and son. So with that, I'll pass this off over to Terry.
So just a quick introduction to AF&PA for those of you who are not familiar with us. So we are the National Trade Association for America's Paper Mills. We have 126 members collectively, and I'll give you a small preview of an update. We represent 89% of the industry by production capacity. We have our new capacity report coming out on Friday, but I can give you a quick update on that one. So you look at our peer group of material associations, material manufacturing associations in Washington, D.C., places like the Aluminum Association. We have a very high rate of representation, one of the strongest material manufacturing associations in D.C. with very strong representation of the industry. We have a very robust statistical program. Our members report to us, which will be the foundation for the statistics that we're going to go into here in a little bit. They report to us their mill level consumption of recovered fiber, their production, all of that. The reports are available for purchase through our statistics program for those entities that are not members that are interested in them. Go ahead and go to the next slide. What I'm really here to talk to you about today is some really exciting work that we've done in the last couple of years to update and improve the way we talk about the paper recycling rates. We have calculated these rates as an industry for a very long time, going back to the early 80s. And there have been a lot of changes that have happened in, the way paper flows and is consumed, particularly the rise of global trade over the years that have really changed the landscape and have necessitated the update as to why we talk about the rates. In a nutshell, when you look at the way we calculated the rate traditionally from a global perspective, it was a very simple numerator denominator calculation in order to get the rate right. Like you took mill consumption of recovered fiber as the numerator over the denominator of what we call new supply, so the material that you put on the market. If you did that on a global basis, you took it just really simply, the amount of fiber that mills consume over the amount of production, you come up with a very straightforward global rate, right? The problem becomes when you start to narrow that by jurisdiction, because trade flows kind of mess with the numbers. So that's really the background that's important to recognize leading into the update of the calculation. So I'm going to use a little bit of terminology. Our goals for today are for you all to have a better understanding of how we do the calculation and how we use some of the terminology when we're talking about the rates. So leading into the next slide here, I've got two concepts to introduce to you. One is a use-based recycling rate, which is the previous version of the rate, which is looking at the share of the amount of recovered paper recycled at mills, versus the new supply, the one that I just talked about. And then the new concept I'm going to introduce to you is a supply-based rate, which is where we're trying to calculate the recycling rate as a ratio of the amount of paper available for recovery, which is a slightly different concept. And the change that's introduced here is we're basically trying to incorporate an estimate of the net imports of product packaging, which is not a finished product. So when we say use-based, what does that mean? That means paper, that we have shipped out for a box plant to a customer that's being consumed in a specific, jurisdiction. So the thing that's not being captured is a box that's produced in China to package, or, another country that imports consumer goods that's used to package a consumer good that's then shipped into the United States. That box is not captured by the use-based calculation. So the most important adjustment that we make in the new methodology for the calculation is that estimate for imported product packaging. And this became important really starting in, kind of early 2000s when China was admitted to the WTO. Then you saw the U.S. trade deficit swell, and you saw a significant increase in this number of net imports of product packaging, right? So it's important to understand that for the 4 decades, that we've been calculating the rate, for the first couple of decades, this really wasn't a huge issue. It wasn't until the U.S. trade deficit grew really large that this number also became very significant. And we've been tracking it probably since the mid-2010s. And it wasn't until, in the past couple of years, we undertook an intensive process that we really became confident in the estimate that we're producing and now feel much better about calculating it. So if we move on to the next slide, let's take a look at the math here. So you can see in the numerator for the overall paper recycling rate, we take recovered fiber used in U.S. manufacturing. So again, that is the mill consumption of recovered fiber that's reported to us through our statistics program. We take a deduction that's based on the ISRI Bale specifications for contamination and net moisture, and then we add back the net exports of recovered paper, and then again with deductions according to the ISRI Bale specs for contamination and net moisture. And then for the numerator, we do the updated of the calculation here. In the previous one, we just took all paper production. This one, we do subtract the grades that are not readily recycled. So this includes, tissue products, and then again, we make adjustments for net imports. And then if we go to the next slide, you'll see this basically the same concept of the calculation for the update for the cardboard rate, or the container board rate is probably the more accurate way of describing it. So if we can go to the next slide, here we go. So this one is a little bit more complicated. We have the best available data on more granular data for container board because we have the ISRI Bale specs for OCC that allow us to do a little bit more segmentation, and then we can add in some estimates based on the OCC that's present in mixed paper bales and take a deduction for paperboard that's in OCC bales, but essentially the same concept here. And then, so if we move on to the next slide, the net result of all of these adjustments that we went through and, this 2-year intensive process, we went back and did calculations for both calendar year 2022 and 2023 to look at the new overall rate. So we have total paper on the side, which includes container board, paperboard, and printing and writing papers, and then the container board recycling rate for both of these years. We're not going to go back and do additional historical calculations. It's a very detailed estimate that we do where we looked at HTS codes at the 4-digit level for imported products in order to develop very detailed estimates of what that imported product packaging is, and it would be way too much of a chore to try to go back and do that historically. So we did 2 years worth of calculations. We'll be releasing the 2024 rate here in the next couple of months once we complete the calculations and estimates required to do that. But we're pretty excited about this. We are leading the world in this. Most of the other main paper trade associations, when you look at the Confederation of European Paper Industries or the Japanese Paper Association, they're still using the old use-based rate. It's pretty routine in Japan for them to report paper recycling rates that are over 100%. I think there's a better understanding of how the statistics work there and what they mean. But for our U.S. audience, in particular, when we get into the policymaking space, this is a better communication of, for the audience that we're working with, of what the additional opportunity is, particularly in the EPR space. The conversation is about what is the additional opportunity to increase paper recycling, right? So that's what the communication here focuses on. And if we go to the next slide, I think going beyond the rates, just, kind of top level trends, and I think Jeff is going to get a little bit more into this. But, the big changes happening in the industry, and that we were excited to incorporate in some of our sustainability goals is, an industry goal we have now to increase our utilization of recovered fiber in manufacturing. You look at all of the recent mill announcements, we've got, 12 companies that have announced 15 new projects across 10 states. If all of these are completed, we're talking about an increase in consumption of recovered fiber of about 9 million tons. So, you know, a lot of exciting stuff happening in this industry on this front. And I think my final slide is just a quick QR code to sign up for the different, you know, news outlets that we have on social media. But appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all about this exciting work.
Thank you. I think we're going to hold questions till the end as we kind of go through this. Next, we're going to have Mr. Leonard step up.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming today and for PSI and Paper Division for sponsoring the Spotlight on Paper. Today we're going to talk about ReMA's fiber recycling readiness tool. This was a tool that was developed out of a request from brands asking what's recyclable, what's not, can we help them make packaging that's more sustainable. And there was a committee put together. You can give me the next slide, please. There's a committee that was put together that involved, we'll get into this, many of the companies that are members of the paper industry to get input, that MRFs, mills, etc. My background with a family-owned company that's been here since 1892. I've been in business for the industry for about 35 years. Various capacities I've been involved with ISRI and now ReMA and other industry committees. And I think that helped us put together a really good group. So let's talk about the recycling tool. Next slide, please. As we all know, packaging is changing. It's moving away from plastic. It's moving into paper. And with it come a lot of other questions. So next slide, please. Fiber readiness recycling tool. It's a research-based approach to access the extent which fiber-based packaging is compatible with current U.S. residential recycling systems and doesn't pose no challenges for that system. So the idea is to create packaging that'll go all the way through MRFs and into mills, reducing contamination and making it recyclable. Next, please. It's a resource for brands and packaging engineers to really determine what will flow through the system as I just described it. It incorporates all staging, all aspects of the recycling process from packaging design through the end markets. Next. The goal was to decrease contamination at the MRF, increase the quality of the bales being sent to the consuming mills, provide immediate feedback to the designers and producers of the packaging as to where they're at in the success of designing a package that's recyclable. It's a free tool open to all users. Next, please. The results and feedback are pretty immediate. Basically, you're entering in data about your package, what it's made of, what the dimensions are, if there's any coatings, etc. And when you get done, you've assessed a certain point structure, and you'll end up with a green code that says you meet the tool's requirements. It will likely pass through the average MRF in the U.S. Yellow means it probably could pass through, but there might be some modifications that you need or some regional or local questions. And then red means you didn't meet the criteria. You should start all over and find out what's wrong, which the tool helps you with, so you can go back to designing it. Next, please. The working group, as you can see, contained brands, MRFs, mills, etc. It was a great group of people. Sean is here in the audience. He was part of the working group, as well as some of the others. It was a really intense project that lasted, I think, about a year and a half, probably, to get to where we're at today. Next, please. The tool was developed in collaboration with the AF&PA, Food Service Packaging Institute Recycling Partnership. Western University played a key part in that. They have a mini mill there that we ran paper through and see how it matched up against the grading. Next, please. 60 brand and packaging users, accounting for $1.4 trillion in revenue, have used this. Most have passed, some have failed, and come back again. So it's out there, it's being used. I think it's being very successful. And next, please. Thank you very much. If you have any questions on it, I'm happy to answer. And we have a QR code, I think, next. If you have any interest in trying it out, snap that. That's all I've got. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Leonard. So in this panel, we're kind of looking at recycling rates and what's a myth and what's true. We have a couple steps. So next we're going to go to Jeff. And Jeff says he lives a boring life, but when he told me he had 3 boys in the tween age, I said, you're not boring even in Connecticut. So from there, Jeff, if you'll take it away.
Thank you, GiGi. Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Ryalls, Vice President, Recovered Fiber for AF&PA. I'm going to start off the presentation by just giving a quick company background. I promise it'll be extremely quick on that front, but I think we have a unique perspective on what we're discussing today, so I'll just give you some of that background to start. I work for the Kraft Group, which is 100% owned by the Kraft family in Foxborough, Massachusetts. They have 5 line mains of business: forest products and packaging, which I'll be discussing today, sports and entertainment, real estate development, private equity investing, and philanthropy. The companies that I spend the majority of my time are IFP is our forest products trading company. We're a physical trader of forest products commodities. We trade about 5 million tons a year through that platform. Rand Whitney Container is our network of box plants in New England. Rand Whitney Container Board is our recycled container board mill in Montville, Connecticut. New Indy Container Board is a JV with the Schwarz family out of Indianapolis. That JV was formed in 2012, has 4 paper mills and a collection of box plants in the Midwest, Southeast, and West Coast. And Rand Whitney Recycling is our recycling plant footprint in New England. Again, that was our volume. We could skip to the next one. Also do some logs and lumber. So today, really going to talk about the shift with more domestic capacity coming online over the last several years, with less export tons of waste paper leaving the country. We're also going to talk about some of how the flows changed with China banning waste paper in 2019. We'll just talk about the overall export volume decline. So this graph here shows that on the virgin side, the capacity in the U.S. market is down about 1 million tons from 2014 to 2025. But then if you look below in the green, the increase in recycled containerboard capacity is 3.4 million tons. As everyone knows, we've seen a lot of conversions in the U.S. marketplace. With those conversions, there's been more waste paper being consumed domestically than we've historically seen. These 2 graphs here, if we really take a look at the export volumes from 2012 through 2024, we see a pretty steep decline of 4 million tons. We've broken this out to show the corrugated declines and the mixed paper declines. Obviously, there's some mill groups that use a lot of mixed paper that have built some mills over the last couple of years, so that's really taken a lot of the mixed paper that was historically in the export markets and kept that grade domestically. The graph to the right just shows the publication grades, printing and writing grades that have declined pretty significantly over the years with more digital media and iPads and iPhones. We kind of all known that story. Next one is we kind of broke out the decline just on corrugated grades. So the high water mark, which was 2018, was 12.5 million tons. And today we're at about 9 million tons. Then if you take a look, we broke it down by market. Obviously, China, some of those shipments that left in late 2019 arrived in 2020, which is why you see that there was still some volume that went into China in 2020. The 2021 through 2024 volume is actually the shipments of OCC from Hong Kong into China. Hong Kong is still allowed to ship waste paper into China, so that's why you see that volume. You can see the India volumes, how much those have fallen off. Asia others has fallen off, and then others is really Canada and Mexico, which I'll get into the next slide. But we've seen a 28% decline since 2008, or about 3.5 million tons on the corrugated side leaving the country. So more tons staying home with all of the new capacity online. So this one is probably the most interesting slide, or at least I'm a recovered fiber nerd, so I found it the most interesting. If you look at U.S. West Coast volumes, 2012, you had almost 12 million tons being exported. Last year was 5.8 million tons. So a significant drop. And then if you look at the East Coast, again, with all the new domestic capacity on the East Coast, we were exporting over 8 million tons in 2012. Last year, under 5 million tons. And again, that's just tied to more tons staying at home. The green line across the bottom are the volumes going into Canada and Mexico. So very interesting, but those volumes have been static over the last 12 years. Not a lot of movement there. That's all I have, and thank you for coming, and look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, as we're going to roll into some questions. I have a couple of things I wanted to ask. So, regarding Mr. Weber, so these changes in trade flow, how does that impact recycled rates?
Well, a good example is looking at between the 2 years that we calculated under the new methodology. 2022 was a stronger year for imports of consumer goods into the U.S., stronger year economically, generally. 2023, there was a little bit of weakness there. When you look at the numbers of how that works out in the net product packaging, that's about 1 million tons of material that did not enter the U.S. market in 2023 that did enter the U.S. market in 2022. And so when you do the sensitivity analysis, that contributes to a good portion of the increase in the recycling rates across those 2 years. So that's some of the biggest impact. I think when we look at 2025, when we think about what's happening with trade this year, just in those 2 years that we've done the calculation, there was a swing of about 1 million tons. I think we can expect swings like that and potential impacts on the recycling rate, as this whole kind of global trade situation shakes out.
Any questions? Well, I have another one. And this is for Leonard, because I love the recycling use tool. And as everybody checked in on the app, you can always, reference that on the website. But this tool, when it said the tool enables users to test it out and then get suggestions on how to improve it. So some of those that have failed it, what kind of packaging were they seeking to qualify?
Well, I can't give out the details. The information is pretty confidential that they send in for obvious reasons. But I can tell you a lot of it might have to do with coatings. Sometimes it has to do with size of the package, because it has to get through a MRF, so 2x2 versus 3x3 versus et cetera. But coatings, poly, things like that, wax.
Has anyone sent a client or customer to the tool for use? You have? Thank you. Yes. What's their response? What's the feedback from them, from that end user experience?
It was designed not to be static. So as technology changes and allows for other types of what we would call contaminants now to be acceptable later, due to technology changes, it'll adjust. There's a feedback process, and the group and the predecessors of the group will be continuing to look at that and make changes when necessary.
Any questions for Jeff? So yes, ma'am.
We were hearing and seeing the same thing, but it didn't. We were preparing for it, but it didn't actually happen. And now I'm hoping with the announcement over the weekend that maybe we'll skate by without it taking place. But even from inland ramp locations and regular coast locations, we were fine as of this week. But we were making a lot of contingency plans based on what we thought was going to happen.
There's probably a delay result. We'll see it maybe in the next couple of weeks. Then all of a sudden we'll see more containers that we can use.
Yes.
All the ships that have been circling, waiting to load in.
This is more of a statement, to Leonard, though. I've been to the Packaging Recycling Summit the last 2 years, and I think if we can get a connection there to have you go to that conference, because that conference has designers there and production people, pretty much 95%. And this tool could go a long way to helping those people. And you'd have a mass audience there to present this to. So I think that would be a good idea.
We'll definitely attend next year.
Yeah, the Packaging Recycling Summit that Ed mentioned is a new conference put on by Packaging World magazine. And it's Packaging Recycling Summit. I think Natalie Betts, I think, has been there and presented last year. I'm not sure about that.
In California.
In Anaheim. Yeah. But, so this is going to be the third year of that conference, and it's I think it's the Ritz-Carlton Los Colinas, in Dallas this year. I think it's the last week of June 25th through 27th or something like that. But you can just Google it, Packaging Recycling Summit. But Ed's correct. All the major brands, are there. The P&Gs, the Unilevers, et cetera. But while I have the mic, I'm going to ask Leonard a question. Leonard, and because you mentioned 2x2 and 3x3, and one company I consulted with and recommended a fiber readiness tool, they were questioning the fact that there's some confusion because I think it's APR that has the plastic packaging design tool. Is it APR? I think it's APR.
Yep.
Not Sustainable Packaging Coalition. I think it's APR that has the plastic design tool, and theirs says 2x2. But I think the paper one, the fiber readiness tool, says 3x3. I'm not sure. I've not gotten.
No, you're absolutely right. There is a point of confusion on that, only in the sense that the feedback we got from the MRFs, the large ones and the smaller ones, was 3x3. I'm not sure how they came up with 2x2, but it's one of those things we're continuing to look at and get feedback on. Brett, go ahead.
So the difference between the two, APR talks to the suppliers that are selling the screens, and they're selling 2x2s right now. And actually, it's just a little bit lower than that. Our survey did a comprehensive view of the MRF nationwide and came out that the common equipment was 3x3. And during some discussion, one of the major collectors was writing into their municipal contracts 4x4s. So they were even higher than that. So we decided that 3x3 was more reflective through the survey that was done by Moore & Associates, that was a better indication of what's going on throughout the MRF industry right now, knowing that in time it will probably become 2x2 as equipment is upgraded.
Good question. Thank you.
Okay, so I went ahead. Yes, the packaging summit is that week in June, the 25th through the 27th in Irving. So anybody wants to take a look at that, that could be very enlightening. And just kind of go after you come.
We were there last year. I don't go, but Brett and some of the team from ReMA go every year. Hopefully they'll be there this year.
It's a fantastic tool, and as more and more smaller hub and spoke structure come online for MRFs and sorting, I think that tool could be applied with almost retrograded technology. So in our industry, we've been asked to do a lot of smaller, still manual sort MRFs because they're just a basic community. They don't have the volume to need any screens or sorters, and they're hand picking it still. In that situation, I could see the size continue to maintain that larger size. It's more common.
As they say, size matters.
Not taking the bait. Anything else?
I have a question.
Yes.
Based on the tariffs, and we got a 90-day reprieve now, but you feel there'll be any noticeable effect on the recovery rate in the end of 2025?
And that's really impossible. It's impossible to predict because both the numerator and the denominator will move. So we're just going to have to see kind of what the volumes report. And, ultimately, based on how the policy shift has gone, it's hard to know because it felt like there was, a rush of, imports in March to try to get ahead of stuff. So it feels like, the more likely outcome is that it all kind of evens out, once you kind of get through the months, but, we'll have to see. And it ultimately kind of depends on where the president ultimately takes this, which we don't know the answer to that yet either.
Hey, this is for Jeff. Hey, Jeff, as far as the material that China will take directly, I know that the corrugated, the mixed paper is going into other Asian countries, and I remember you telling me about them shredding it up, mixing it up, and sending it over. But what grades and other types of material are they taking directly from the United States into China?
So on the waste paper grades, it's nothing at all. Not even DLK or magazines. It's a complete ban. So the only thing that is moving in is the dry pulp from Thailand. So basically our DLK and OCC go to Thailand. It gets converted into a dry pulp and then gets brought to the country. But there's zero waste paper of any HS code going into China from the U.S. Just rolls and pulp. Yep.
Feel that Europe is picking up the slack? They're buying from there, or is there going to be a shortage?
So it's an interesting timing, but right now Europe is in the midst of a significant amount of new capacity coming online across the continent. So they're going through what we went through the past couple of years with a lot of new paper machines. So their export volumes are actually dropping out of Europe, with more tons staying home to support the domestic mills that are being built on the continent.
There was some proposed legislation in the EU to limit the amount of export that would be allowed, which would limit China's ability or Southeast Asia's ability to pull paper, and they'd have to pull more from here.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of conjecture around the UWID, and I don't know. I think it was delayed. I'm not a government affairs expert, but I believe that the legislation in Europe around that was delayed because there was just not enough time for people to prepare.
Yes, sir.
You can barely hear me. Okay. Call my wife and tell her you can't hear me now. I've lowered my voice. So thank you for coming. Good presentation. You mentioned, I believe the number was 9 million tons of new capacity. But of course, we've seen containerboard in 2022 and 2023 production go down in the U.S. I think probably combined between the 2 years, somewhere between 9 and 11 or 12%. I'm not sure exactly what it was. And I think 2024, it's gone up like 0.1% or a very small amount. So obviously, one thing is you talk, capacity versus production. The second thing is we all know in this room, and I think it's important to address that we've seen a lot of mill closures. And so do you have a net number for capacity for containerboard in terms of what the capacity is in the U.S., the projected increases versus the decreases? And the good thing about the increases is most of it's 100% recycled, and a lot of the volume that's gone away and production's gone away is virgin. So do you track numbers on that, and can you address that at all?
We do track numbers on that. As you know, Miles, we are a trade association, so we do not do projections. Like we can't project mill closures, right? So what I'm able to share with you is the public announcements of the companies that plan to build the new projects, and that's where that kind of incremental 9 million tons comes from. But, when companies announce mill closures, they announce mill closures. And we've certainly seen some capacity taken offline. I think the theme is, there's some mill consumption of recovered fiber that's been taken offline and some of those announced closures. But, the lion's share of those closures are coming out of the category of mills that use wood fiber as the feedstock, right? So that's kind of what you're seeing as the industry is changing over time. We haven't netted out the calculation. Again, I can't do projections because that's not our business. But in the last few years, it's been stable in the last couple of years. A little bit of movement. Jeff showed you the chart of kind of where the overall industry production is, and that the increasing line on the recovered fiber mill production. So and then we have our new capacity report that's coming out on Friday that'll reflect the 2024 numbers.
One other thing I want to mention, and this is just a public service announcement, for those of you who were in the ReMA presentation this morning, the general session, I don't know how many were in, and they showed some of the new ads and the billboards and all the other stuff, and they say 75% of a car is made with recycled steel, and whatever the number is or whatever. They have one specifically for cardboard boxes, and they have one that says billboards that say something like over 50% of every cardboard box contains recycled material. So it's pretty good, and it's good that we, as a paper industry, have a paper group that can advocate for ReMA to do that kind of stuff.
So I will say one statistic that is reflective of what you're talking about is for our 2030 sustainability goals, we set a new goal for us, right? Which as an industry took us a long time to get there, but that goal of 50% utilization of, recovered fiber and secondary materials in manufacturing. Over the last few years, it was very contentious to kind of arrive at a number because, as you know, our CEOs are very grounded, and, we are going to set goals that we have a plan to get. Like, we do not, as an industry, our philosophy is we don't do aspirational goals. We set goals that we can realistically achieve. And in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of progress, and, if things continue on the track we're on, it's likely that we're going to hit that goal early, ahead of 2030. So, to the point that you're making, there's been meaningful progress as an industry on that in the past couple of years.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was referring to your slide showing with the fall off from India, who was such a buyer of U.S. recovered fiber. And with them falling off, who are the emerging countries?
So I think on India, and if we had more time, I would have done another slide. As the volumes fell off from the U.S., the volumes increased from Europe. So when they couldn't get the tons that they wanted, or we couldn't fulfill their needs, they went to Europe to get those tons. So, we still see the U.S. market as being heavily dominated by Southeast Asia and India. I mean, that's where the lion's share of the volume is going. But when they can't get their fill for whatever reasons, maybe it's price, maybe it's volume availability, they go to Europe. That's kind of the two markets that they ping pong back and forth between.
North American fiber continues to be the fiber of choice. They can get it.
Correct, because of the fiber length. Yep, absolutely.
Perfect. Quick question. What we're noticing with brands is they're shifting away from plastic-based packaging to some paper-based wrappers stuff. Do you see that as a risk or opportunity for the paper industry?
Are you asking anybody in particular?
Mars has moved from their candy wrappers that were plastic to paper-based in Europe, and I think they're looking at kind of introducing something similar here in North America. We think it's coming because there's so much pressure, especially like California's EPR law that targets plastics. And instead of paying those fees, they'd rather switch to paper-based. But you have to imagine there's some sort of coating that's got to go with it to keep it fresh.
You got coating, you've got size, you have post-consumer organic waste, and there's a lot of things that have to be taken into consideration. The general movement from paper to plastic, like graphic packaging and some others that have developed, the UVC can holders that, used to be plastic, and in Europe, I think you guys have been successful in paper. That's going to be coming this way. So more and more options. I think those are things that we have to take a look at, as I just said, because of the coatings, because of the post-consumer nature and so forth. So, I think every mill here, I'm not a mill, but I think every mill is looking for new sources of fiber that they can use.
So I guess the one plug I would offer in that space as an industry, we just completed an update to the recyclability and repulpability standard for OCC and OCC equivalents. So we just published this probably last week. You might recognize this. This is what the old wax alternative standard, that was the original reason that it was developed. And we found that brands were using it as a general recyclability and repulpability standard for anything that goes in the OCC bale. So we've done a full update to that standard now that all the companies have signed off on. We've got all the paper labs signed up, Western Michigan, and kind of the whole crew that's set with that. But the important thing to note is the next step in the work that we're doing there is a recyclability and repulpability standard for mixed paper. So that's going to be a new tool. We're hoping to be done with that in the next couple of years, but recognizing that you need some kind of objective standard guidelines that can produce, valid and repeatable, lab results for material that's intended for the mixed paper bale. So we're hoping to, get that information out there so that basically the mills have kind of a clear opinion for all of those kinds of products, whether something at the paper machine level is going to meet, kind of the standards of what we see as, repulpable and recyclable.
It's a good question. Thank you. So to speak to that question in packaging, that really changes your sizing. That really would impact your sizing on packaging when you get to like a candy bar wrapper. And so currently in the MRFs, how a lot of that flows into the waste stream from the MRF because it falls through all the equipment. So a different grade or weight of paper in that packaging, is it going to be reclaimed, or is that what we're looking forward to in changing that kind of packaging?
I think he just answered the question. Is it recyclable and repulpable? It depends to what kind of sizing is in it, what kind of coating's on it. There's a lot of questions about it, so I don't have the answers.
It's never boring. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, guys.
So if I can ask everybody to pull up your app and check into our spotlight, we can grow it for next year with some recognition on the technology level. So next year's ReMA, we have another big room and fill it up. Also, any feedback or suggestions on the panel development would be great to PSI. Kathy, thank you. Ladies, gentlemen, have a great day.